President Trump is responding to South Korea's offer to hold talks with North Korea ahead of next month's Winter Olympics. In a tweet this morning, President Trump wrote, quote, "Sanctions and other pressures are beginning to have a big impact on North Korea. Rocket Man now wants to talk to South Korea for the first time. Perhaps that is good news. Perhaps not. We will see."
Well, the president's tweet comes after Kim Jong-un's latest threat against the U.S. During a New Year's Day speech, he said the entire United States is within range of his country's nuclear weapons. For more on this, we are joined by Sabrina Siddiqui. She's a CBSN political contributor and a Guardian political reporter. She joins us now from Washington. Sabrina, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
So listen, the president's tweet says that sanctions are having a strong impact on North Korea. North Korea appears to be continuing to expand its nuclear threat, and now we understand that South Korea is potentially at least open to talking to the North about the political ramifications of all that's been going on. It almost feels as if the South is like, look, there's a lot of issues with the United States. Maybe we can go at it better on our own with our neighbors than having the United States as an intermediary.
Yes, I think that it's preferable still for all parties involved to pursue a diplomatic resolution here. The U.S. and its allies, including South Korea and Japan, have been applying economic pressure on Pyongyang through the use of sanctions. We know that that was part of the United Nations resolution. And insofar as they're taking effect, I think it's obviously going to be a slow progression, but it's something that they hope will bring Kim Jong-un to the negotiating table. It's obviously difficult to tell what will happen if tensions continue to escalate and how this president would respond in a crisis situation. And so I do think that you have, as you mentioned, other allies, especially South Korea, which stands in immediate danger and is more within the immediate line of threat, wanting to at least see if the Olympics offer some potential for opening up some sort of talks.
So these talks that they may be finding a date for could happen in a couple of weeks, really. And what we're hearing is that the likelihood is that they will talk about the Winter Games and North Korea participating in the Winter Games. But is there a possibility they could talk about something beyond that?
Absolutely. My understanding is that South Korea extended the offer to hold these talks on January 9th. It remains to be seen, of course, how Pyongyang will respond. But at the end of the day, the end goal is really about nuclear deterrence. And I think that because North Korea is continuing to expand its nuclear missile program, and you have a leader who continues to engage in bellicose rhetoric, there's going to, of course, be an attempt to see if there is some sort of negotiation possible, perhaps lifting of certain sanctions, if you have some sort of signaling from Pyongyang that they are in fact open to a diplomatic resolution. But we do know, as you mentioned, that given the type of rhetoric that Kim Jong-un has engaged in and the erratic behavior that he has exhibited, I don't think that there's necessarily any real hope until and when he comes to the negotiating table.
Sabrina, let's talk about another international crisis that is weighing on President Trump right now, and that is Iran. This morning, he tweeted again about the ongoing protests there, writing, quote, "The people of Iran are finally acting against the brutal and corrupt Iranian regime. The people have little food, big inflation, and no human rights. The U.S. is watching." Help us explain the president's strategy here. I mean, will these tweets have any impact on what is happening there, or is it just a way for him to vent using social media, which he has used to great success, some would argue?
Well, I think that the president is certainly seizing on these protests as an opportunity to defend his own posture toward Iran, which has been much more aggressive than his predecessor. He certainly moved to decertify the Iran nuclear deal that was struck by the Obama administration. He is engaged in a very hostile rhetoric toward Tehran. So I think that he sees these protests as an opportunity to say, look, this is precisely why I believe that we should pursue regime change, or at least support it. The question is, how cautious will this president be? Because I think that the strategy that most presidents use when you have these uprisings, especially in areas that remain subject to instability, is to be cautious, to wait and watch, to not necessarily respond beyond expressing your support for the democratic process. It remains to be seen if Trump is going to go beyond that, but certainly he sees this as an opportunity to sell his own foreign policy toward Iran.
And Sabrina, the reason I asked that question is because the president is in support of the protests that are happening in Iran. But when the protests are against him, his policies, his administration, there's a very different tone that the president strikes.
Well, I think that the first year of the Trump presidency has certainly undermined the global standing insofar as the United States is concerned, not simply because of the points that you mentioned, where he hasn't always practiced what he preaches at home with respect to freedom of the press or supporting civil rights demonstrations, for example, those against during the national anthem. There's also the question of the way in which he has alienated key allies of the United States and engaged in more aggressive rhetoric when that's not typically how diplomacy is conducted. So you also have a situation where in Iran, this is not a president who is popular among the people. Iran was mentioned in one of the iterations of his travel ban. The Iran nuclear deal, which was designed for the express purpose of lifting economic sanctions on Tehran, that is something that he has sought to tear up. So I think that there are a lot of mixed messages when you're looking at this administration, and it certainly makes it a little bit more difficult for them, whereas you're comparing with previous administrations, to simply express support for the people of Iran. It actually could, if anything, potentially be a tool for the government to frame this as something that is supported by Trump and to try and align the protesters with an unpopular American president.
Very interesting. So the president has been tweeting a lot this morning, Sabrina, including some domestic issues. I'm going to read you his tweet on DACA. Democrats are doing nothing for DACA, just interested in politics. DACA activists and Hispanics will go hard against Dems. Will start, quote, falling in love with Republicans and their president. We are about results. All right, so what comes next with this DACA battle? For a while there, it seemed like the Democrats were going to try to hook it to funding the government. They didn't do it last year, but how do you foresee this battle sort of unfolding?
I think Democrats are still very much going to try to tie a DACA fix to the upcoming spending negotiations based on what Congress passed before they adjourned for the holidays. They now face a deadline of January 19th to avert a government shutdown, so they really just kicked the can down the road for a couple of weeks. Now, Republicans are saying that the president has given Congress a deadline of March 5th for DACA, so there's more room to operate. But I know that Democrats feel that the only way to force Republicans' hands is to tie it to a must-pass bill, which would be the spending resolution to keep the government open. There are negotiations within a bipartisan group of senators who are looking to unveil their own proposal, and Mitch McConnell has said that he would bring that up for a standalone vote in late January, potentially, if there is in fact a compromise that is reached. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of typically partisan politics at play, and it's really going to be a question of what border security measures are Democrats going to be willing to accept, and are Republicans going to make the infamous border wall that Trump has asked for a part of these negotiations, because that is a non-starter for Democrats.
Sabrina, before we let you go, I got to ask you about this tweet that the president put out today, and I'm going to quote it here. Since taking office, I have been very strict on commercial aviation. Good news, it was just reported that there were 0 deaths in 2017, the best and safest year on record. Now, the president, there's been a lot of people tweeting about this because it seems as if the president is taking credit for the fact that, thank God, there have been no significant commercial aviation crashes in the last year. But I wonder, on a serious note, if that's sort of dangerous for the president to do that, because by putting out a tweet saying, in essence, that you're the reason why there haven't been any crashes, if something, God forbid, should happen, where would that leave the president?
Right. I think there's a lot going on here, and this is not uncommon for this president to want to take credit, even on issues where it's unclear why he would be the one responsible, and he is teeing himself up then for the reverse, where then he'd take responsibility if that were to change. It's notable, though, that there has not been a major commercial aviation disaster in the U.S. since 2009. So these statistics that have come out are speaking more to a global perspective, and so why this president would take credit for the lack of commercial aviation disasters in other countries is unclear as well. You know, this is a place, though, where I think that both parties do support a lot more regulation when it comes to the FAA. But it's not something that you've heard the president talk about in his first year in office. That was airline safety was not really a speech that I recall him delivering to the public. So it's sort of par for the course with this president.
He focused a lot on infrastructure and our airports needing better infrastructure. But yeah, I was sort of trying to go through, you know, trying to scroll through articles to find out what exactly did he do in regards to airline safety in the past year. I didn't find anything, but it could be out there.
And I mean, the reality is, as you point out, Sabrina, this is a trend that we've seen across many different countries, and perhaps, as some people have suggested, maybe giving a shout out to the pilots, the air traffic controllers, the FAA, and other organizations that are responsible for keeping all of us, no matter what country you're from, safe when we travel. It is still the safest form of travel.
Absolutely. I mean, this president sees something good in the news. I think his knee-jerk reaction is to say that good news is because of me. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, and some of it is just almost expected now. Absolutely.
Sabrina Siddiqui, as always, thank you very much. Have a wonderful 2018. We'll be talking to you.
Thank you so much. Happy New Year again.